Tonight, our conversation is going to be about dealing with debt. But before we dive into dealing with debt, I want to remind you of what we where we started last week. The whole course is about becoming profitable, and profit is really about having us move into what is called abundance or overflow. It's moving into where our income exceeds our expenses, and that's where we have profit. And so here is a vision of profit. The purpose of profit is one, is vision. Profit will help you to fund the dreams, the visions, the desires you have for the future. Because if you're only making enough to stay alive, to keep on working, to make the same amount to stay alive, then you won't have enough to fuel your vision. Profit creates for you a buffer so that when there is an emergency, a crisis, a downturn in the economy, recently somebody I know, they went through a job change and it reduced their income significantly. But because they had a buffer, because during the previous years they saved profit, they had a buffer or a contingency fund, or what some would call an emergency fund. And therefore, that's what we use profit for. The other purpose of profits is to give you a legacy. That way, your children's children get benefited from what you do. Generational wealth and the transfer of wealth is a very real thing. And you want to have your future generation start on a better foundation that you started. And so that's why it's so important for us to make a profit. The reason profit is also important is that it adds value. That this is how you get to improve your life, your home, your lifestyle, your generosity, your it adds value. So you increase your profit not just to have on paper that your net worth increased, but really that you can add value to your life. The next thing that profit does is that it literally funds impact. It takes money to do ministry, is what people say, and therefore you can make a difference in people's lives through the profit that you have, so that you're able to give, you're able to bless, you're able to do what you do without a sense of lack or a sense of loss. And so that is a value of profit, and that's why we do it. And so the third thing, of course, is that profit is allows us to honor God, and to give Him our best because we have everything that in store. In business, people use profit, and we use profit in our business to maintain stability and sustainability of the business. We have employees, and therefore, if you don't have profit, at some point you're going to end up making some choices, and people are going to lose their jobs. In business, we use it for reinvestment, for risk buffering as well, just like what we would have to do in person. It's used in business also as a measurement of value. You're able to value, so Tesla is like X billion and Meta is X billion. That really, in those super companies, they do their valuations, and their profit affects their earnings per share, affects their stock value, all of those things. But if you bring it down to the small business, is that profit allows you to have leverage that you can then communicate with financing for bigger projects. Your profit gives you freedom to do more of what you want, and that's what why we I want to bring our attention. The reason for this course is to help you to become profitable more and more. The other thing I want to tell you about what the Bible talks about profit, just for you to have a biblical sense and foundation of what this profit idea is all about, is that in the Bible, abundance is your overflow, and abundance is the amount over and above what you need. In business, profit is the amount over and above your expenses and the cost of operating. And so, therefore, often when you see the word abundance in the text, it is speaking in the same language and the same sense of profit. And so in Proverbs 21, verse 5, it says, "The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty." And so, therefore, diligence leads to profit. So, as we do this course, the most important thing for you to have is a little discipline, a little diligence, so that you can make a profit. It's going to take a little diligence. It's going to take a little discipline for you to stick to your plan to make a profit. If you don't have a plan, you lose already. And if you have a plan, you have to have diligence to stick to it. And we're going to try to help you to make the simplest plan possible, that it's not too complicated, it's not too so involved that you can't stick to it. Trust me, if I can stick to it, you can stick to it. The second thing the Bible says is that money does fund ministry. In 2 Corinthians 9, verse 8, it says, and God is able to bless you abundantly, that is, over what you need, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound, you would overflow, you would increase in profit enough to fund every good work that he has given us. And you and I know that according to Ephesians 2, verse 8 to 10, it says, we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. So there is a good work, there is a purpose, there is a design for you and I to do. And it's going to take that abundance, that abounding, that overflow to make it happen. Bottom line, it's going to take profit for you to fund the ministry that God has in store for you. And it would help you to do so, because it does take cash to care. The third item that I want to highlight from the scriptures is the purpose of profit is generosity. In that same 2 Corinthians, it says, you will be enriched in every way, that you can be generous on every occasion. That's my personal ambition, that God would just cause the overflow and grant favor in every endeavor, and that with our diligence and our stewardship, along with his favor, that we will be able to be generous on every occasion. And then through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. And that's kind of where this is going to be going. And so the purpose why we're doing this is to help you to overflow, that you can be generous. But it first starts by you learning some basic principle of thriving personally. And then step 2 is overflow. All right, cool. One thing I mentioned last week, and there are some things that we do instinctively, or that I do just over practice and time. And I was trying to think of how can I explain it in a way, and of course try to make it creative with this acronym, to say, okay, these are the thoughts that I do when I'm working on a project, how it kind of like shapes how I look to the future. And in our bonus class, I'm going to break down some more in details of how you can think in a certain way to create long-term viability when it comes to profit. So here is some of the principles that, and again, it's just personal. This is not like from a business book or anything, but it does align well with the principles of business too. So here is a thrive. It says, first, trace the source. That is what I'm doing aligned with God's character, of integrity, of doing what's right, of truth telling, of being fair. I mean, you want to make sure I want to make sure my conscience is clear when I'm working this money deal, when I'm doing this project, when I want to do this investment, when I'm doing business. There is a sense in which there is a peace in my heart about what I'm doing. You don't want to have any sense of crookedness in you when you're operating. And so that's one of the first principles that I kind of live by when it comes to thriving and creating some kind of profit. The H stands for honoring God first. And again, this is a basic Christian value. And so this is what we follow at our home, where whatever we're doing, we say, what, Christ is first. And so we return to him a tenth of whatever we earn, and also we give offerings. And we make sure that goes first, because again, we're keeping ourselves aligned with the Lord. We're serving God, not money. And so I can hand the money freely and not with any sense of guilt or worry, because we're putting God first. And we do that by saying, hey, here is a tithe, there is an offering. We settle that check that off the list, and we're good to go. I mean, I know some very um, business people who they're not very often churchgoers, but they always still put God first in their finances because they say, you know what, is God bless why I can be where I am, and so therefore we want to always honor the Lord that way. So I do. So I trace the source, make sure the source of everything I'm doing is still in alignment with God. We honor God first. The third item, which is the essential item that we talked about, a little bit about last week, which is that we remove the waste. We find that a lot of our profitability is lost through waste, right? And so therefore, last week the homework was to go through your numbers for the last month and see where you found waste for yourself, what you consider to be waste, where you thought, you know what, this ain't good. I don't like this because it's wasting. Like a subscription to a gym that I'm not going, waste. To have to reclaim that $30 to Showtime or Stars or a subscription where I took it out to watch a series I wanted to see. The series is done. Now I better just cancel that thing and save that $11 or $10.99 for that. And it may seem small, but you have to determine what is the waste that you're trying to evaluate in your life. And you would notice, did I spend too much on the whatever it is for you? And that's why for me, I never tell people what is a waste for you. You know the value it brings to your life. You know how it prepares you to get on with your sense of purpose. And so you evaluate for yourself, what is your waste? If it's essential for you to have that Starbucks $6 coffee for you to function, then do what's good for you. But if you can create an alternative to save, then do what's good for you. Are you tracking with me? And so I don't want to tell you which one of your items are, but I can tell you if you evaluate it, see where it's going, and then you make a decision. So one of the things I want you to put in the chat today is after your evaluation, how much would you have estimated to be waste? And so, for example, we did this last year with a group. They evaluated their waste, and it's for some people it was like $100 and something a month. For some people, it was over $1,000 per month. And then I said, tell you what, now that you know what your waste was for that month, multiply that by 12 and see the full impact of your decision to eliminate that waste. And then recognize that that's how profitable you can be. See? And so if you can, and you did the homework, special kudos to you. But put in the chat my dollar value of what I would be saving by eliminating waste is, and put that what that monthly number would be. Like, what would it be for per month to save on that? And that's like, it's always a very exciting exercise to see when people get to evaluate their waste. Now, for some people, you have already trimmed the fat, you've cleaned things up, and you are good. So base level, that's great. However, there are times in my life where I have a certain goal and I have to cut some things out for the sake of that goal. And therefore, that now moves into not waste, but that comes into sacrifice for my greater good. See, I remember one year at our church, we were doing this big capital campaign, and everybody was giving towards, getting the building where we are. And we're like, you know what? We're going to do this. And so everybody was making their commitments, and Charmin and I thought, you know what? We're going to believe God, and we're going to give this certain amount. And we said we would. And then as we evaluated where our income expenses were, we say, you know what? Let's just sacrifice a few things to make sure meet that goal. And guess what? We cut back in those days, it was like cable and all kind of stuff. We shrunk it down so that we could do that year a double tithe of our income. And as we did that, about the eighth month, favor opened up and opportunities came that replaced all what we sacrificed and gave us more. And I am fully convinced it's because we were doing that to honor God that He did that for us. And so There are times when you have to sacrifice for the greater good. See, but the first step really is just removing waste. You move into the sacrificial side to get towards your big goals. But just to live comfortably and thrive, eliminate waste, and maybe I mean, for us, once a year, we just kind of evaluate everything and see where the wastes are, and we take it out. And especially when I'm doing this course as well, I'm always remembering, oh yeah, that subscription, no, that one, and try to get rid of it. So that's kind of how we do the waste. When we get to our big projects of making money, I'll talk about sacrifice and how to work some of that stuff out. The next thing is imagine the margin, right? What does this surplus do for my family, for my community, for the kingdom? What does it do for me? And so therefore I keep that in front. You have to imagine where you're going. And because if you don't, you lose motivation. If you don't, you forget why you're doing what you're doing. But when you're dreaming that dream, I had a friend of ours who was going to a high school reunion, and she went on, I can't remember the name of the dad, like a keto or some kind of dad, lost like 28 pounds. But every day when she was tempted to have something bad, she kept remembering what she was doing all this for, because she wanted to show up at that reunion and, look more fine, I suppose. And that motivated her. And so the question is, what's motivating you? What is the margin? What is the goal of your margin that you're working towards? Because that is what's going to make a big difference in what you are able to do. And so maintain that. Remember the purpose of your margin. When you stick to that, it helps you to keep on going. Let me remind us of what we use our profit for. And so let me see if I can get you that one. There we go. It says, where does your profit go? Emergency, investment, retirement, your children, generosity. You have to determine where for you that's going to be, and blow this up because you're keeping it in front. Last week, many of you told me that you're aiming for your house, or you're aiming for, a business, whatever it is. You just keep that in front. Take a picture of it. I remember we were working on some townhome project, and I had that picture up on as my wallpaper for my computer. So that as I'm making decisions, going through stuff, I'll always remember, that's why I'm doing this, and not forget. And so the V in Thrive is to validate the impact. Again, who is it for? Who is this going to make a difference? When I make this profit, when it does well, there's always a who that it impacts, not just a what. And then here is the genius of it all, is establish a timeline. Do you know that you are able to plan something 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now, and then work step by step back towards now, and do small things now to make a big difference in the long term? Many times we get caught in a trap where I want to know, this is the year, I'm going to do it. And you get frustrated because you can't do it. What if you learn how to extend the timeline and say, this year, I'm going to work on this piece. Next year, this piece. That year, this piece. And each year, just add that piece, or each time period, create those milestones. And then you'll be poised, or what I call it, you'll be postured for progress. You'll be ready when the time comes to make your move. And so that's kind of like bringing us back to where we are today, because the truth is, one of the biggest things that impact your ability to thrive are these leaks. Your wealth is limited to your leaks. And one of the most significant leaks, one of the most destructive leaks, one of the leaks that really just burn away your income, is not managing this thing called debt properly. See? And so we're going to learn how to use it and how to lose it, right?